Thank you for joining us for the next episode of Cybersecurity Distilled, a show designed to break down the complex problems, concepts, and technologies facing cybersecurity professionals today while exploring the complex flavors of our favorite distilled spirits. I'm your host, Andy Bennett, and in my day job, I'm the CISO of Apollo Information Systems, and this is a production of Apollo Information Systems. With me here today is my friend Michael Fitch, who, among other things, being an extraordinary cyber professional whom I count on as one of my sounding boards and whose accomplishments I respect. There's something else about him that everybody does need to know. He has the most highly trained cyber parrot in the country. And someday that parrot is going to start talking, and he is probably going to just start speaking in IP addresses and firewall rules. Michael, how are you today?
Hey, Andy. I'm great. Great to see you here today.
Likewise. Thanks for joining us.
The parrot is with us too. I think he's off camera at the moment. We'll see if he decides to make an appearance or not.
Well, he's welcome.
I have to say, Pete is the cybersecurity brains of the operation here. He certainly has attended more cybersecurity courses than I think just about anybody I know.
I am not surprised in the slightest. Not at all. But you also have some other hobbies too, right? You like the occasional motorcycle ride, and you also do some skydiving.
Yeah, well, so I like to consider myself a lapsed skydiver right now. It's been a couple of years since my last jump, but it is definitely in the cards for the next year or two. My goal is to go back and finish my A license. I'm about halfway there. I think I've got about another, well, I'll probably have to repeat a few, but about 14 more jumps to get my A license. And it is a beautiful day here in Austin today. So I'm thrilled to be here, really happy to be talking to you. But as soon as we're done, I think I'm going to hit the road and go for a ride for a couple hours. Well,
I've been outside today too, and you absolutely should take advantage of it because it's not always this nice here. Sometimes for those of you who are not from the Austin area, sometimes it is just an oven, and other times we get the snowpocalypse, and there's a few months in between where things are generally pretty nice. But today is a unique day that's actually it's the last day of school, so I'm going to count it as summer. Memorial Day is Monday. That's when we're recording this, and the weather is just phenomenal today, so don't waste it. I agree.
It's perfect. And I think one thing I didn't know about cybersecurity before I really got into it was it makes you pale. So I need to go out and get some vitamin D and see if I can, recharge a little bit today.
Absolutely. It does make you pale, although I am sporting a pretty good farmer's tan right now. But that's because we bought some property out in the middle of nowhere, and it takes work outside to keep the property from turning into a jungle. So I've got a pretty good farmer's tan going on, though I am not technically a farmer. I'm just a person who's got a big yard to take care of.
Well, I get you a little bit of vitamin D, so that sounds all right.
It does. But your method seems a little more relaxing, although mine's pretty cathartic sometimes. So give us a little bit of background. What are you doing and where are you doing it, and how long you've been doing it?
So I am now in Austin, Texas. Been here for just about a little more than 2 years now. Started a new program here supporting the state back in March of 2020. Right as the pandemic was hitting. So I was
talk about timing.
Yeah, great timing. Story of my life. I was really fortunate to be able to move down here before things got too crazy and too difficult. So right as the pandemic was getting going, moved here to North Austin. And I've been in IT for about 27 years. I was just thinking about that earlier today. Started my career in Cleveland back in the mid 1990s. Been with a company called SAIC. I'm coming up on 21 years of service this year. So pretty cool milestone that I'm looking forward to. That's coming up in August. And, I have always been interested in IT and security. I think my first job at SAIC was a really cool one. I was doing support for a customer that had outsourced their IT. They had a large Unix installation. I think we had, 200, 250 servers from all different vendors. Sun, HP, Digital, you name it, and all of the support staff had left. They really didn't know much about continuity of operations at that time. And my first assignment was being hired as a Unix systems administrator, and job one was breaking in to the 250 systems with my team of colleagues, my new colleagues, because none of us had the passwords. So
is that how you got started in security?
That was my first
admin too, and I've broken a few systems myself for similar reasons.
Yeah, it was great. They asked me to do it and learned a whole lot. Was a Unix systems administrator for years after that. And then one of the things I really loved about SAIC is every couple of years I get to do something new. And so been really fortunate to be able to work all around the country and all around the world, actually, doing different things, doing system administration, data center management, storage, cloud, lots of project management, more and more business management, always cybersecurity in there woven throughout. And yeah, I've really enjoyed the opportunity to do different things over the years.
Fantastic. So a little known fact that I think Michael knows is that I also worked at SAIC in a past life, although my timing was not nearly as good as his because I landed there right before the air quotes Great Recession in 2008. And so I was the low man on the totem pole, so to speak, and I got walking papers with a whole bunch of my peers around that time. Mostly it was that projects dried up and there was nowhere else to put me. And so, business is business. But Michael and I have compared notes and we barely missed each other because I was working on modernization and business continuity back in 2007 and 2008, and he was working in similar areas. And one of the new positions I was headed for potentially before the downturn was it Alaska? Is that where it was?
Yeah, Alaska. Yep.
That's right. So I was headed that direction, and one of us almost ended up working for the other. He had a couple of years on me at the time, so I probably would have ended up working for him. So we were that close, and it took us another many years, more than 10 years after that to actually finally meet. But we found we have a lot of overlap.
Yeah, that was a near miss, and it's too bad that we didn't get a chance to work together up in Alaska. It's a cool place. I love my time up there, but it's funny how small of a community it is. Mm-hmm. I think there's some gravity around great minds. I think people tend to run into each other, then they come back into their orbits at a later time, and it's amazed me. There are times that I've been out at an airport or just out on vacation somewhere, and you'll bump into someone that you worked with 5 years ago, 15 years ago. So yeah, it's great to be able to finally, work with you a little bit down here in Texas. And
right before I ran away, right?
Right before you ran away. Yeah,
that's right. Well, the community is a lot smaller than people think it is, right? We were one degree of separation out from being direct connections for a long time there, and it's amazing. I'm constantly amazed. I was once traveling in Eastern Europe for work and ran into two people I knew while I was there. I was there for work. They were there for vacation, but I ran into two separate people I knew in the middle of nowhere in Eastern Europe. And they weren't even cyber people, but I have had the same experience. I'm running into the same people over and over again. And so have you experienced the regionality of the communities? So like there is a central Texas centric, but central US kind of cyber community, and people kind of go up and down the corridor. And there's an East Coast cyber community that is fairly distinct. There's a West Coast, but the West Coast bleeds into the other two because there's constantly a migration between Central and East into and out of West. But that's kind of how I've seen the breakdown sort out over the years. Is the Central and Eastern don't actually mix all that much unless you intentionally throw yourself in there. But you've worked across both now. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point. And while I've seen it a little bit from region to region, the other thing that's really struck me is how, especially in cybersecurity, how some of the communities have changed over the years. If I think back, especially 15 years ago or so, some of the cyber communities that I was involved with were very closed. Like you had to know somebody who knew the secret handshake before you were kind of welcomed into the fold. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, they would talk in whispers around you and wouldn't share as much. And one of the things that I think is really great is that the community has matured a lot more. And I think there's been a recognition that, we certainly have to vet who's part of the communities that we participate in, but there's such value and there's such importance to collaborating. My sister's a medical doctor, and one of the things watching her go through medical school and then go through a residency it's absolutely a team sport. We think of doctors as the pinnacle of their profession and being independently decisive and authoritarian. And the reality is, they so often seek the validation, the thoughts of other people. And I think the same thing really applies to cybersecurity, in that there's that recognition that we are much stronger as a community, and that we are much stronger as a community that collaborates. And so I've been really happy to see that shift over time.
So I saw a post on LinkedIn that was not on my list to talk about today, but something you said just brought it to mind. And that is also inside the community, there's we are jargon heavy. We have our own language. You can practically use entire paragraphs with nothing but acronyms and verbs, right? And sometimes the acronyms even include the verbs, and you just add ing to the end of it so that everybody knows what you're doing, right? But the post was about imposter syndrome. And I don't know even why what you said brought it up to me, because it's not on my list of things we should talk about. But imposter syndrome is something that I think, as the community has widened, there's always those people who are the self-proclaimed experts who are absolutely not experts in the vast majority of cases. And there's also a whole huge group of folks there who are generally probably pretty competent, but who are always suffering from self-doubt when they're at a conference and they're confronted with mountains of new jargon because Gartner invented a new platform, for example, right? And everybody else is just nodding and taking notes. But do you think they're all writing down the jargon to look up, or does the majority of the audience actually keep up with things as well as the rest of us think they are when we look around and see everybody nodding at the conference?
That's such an interesting point. And there's like three things that occur to me in thinking about that. One, as far as the jargon, there's so often, I admit, I hear a new term, or I read a new term, and I think, gee, what is that? And why don't I know about that? So I'll do some Googling and I'll do some research and hit all my favorite websites. And it fascinates me how many times new jargon is really a recrafting of an old concept.
Ooh, yeah, you're absolutely. Go on.
So, well, I mean, and not to say that the new concept isn't evolved.
Sure.
But the whole, I'll just take my current favorite, zero trust. Zero trust is so many different things to different people, and you have to be careful talking about zero trust, because some people will think, well, that's a product, and if I get that, then I'm zero trust, or it's this or it's that. And for me, that the deeper we delve into zero trust, it's really an evolution of least privilege. It's just applying it to everything. It is, and least privilege has been around for how long?
Sure, absolutely. So, and I think, since we're distilling things, when you distill zero trust down to that level, what it is the evolution of least privilege by combining it, the natural combination of close protection. You move the protection close to the thing you're protecting, and you don't trust anybody else who's getting to it, right? And trust is the problem is, and here's the problem, and I got this from John Kindervag, who I think I've mentioned in a previous podcast, is that trust is an emotion. Systems don't have emotions. How much do you trust somebody? I don't know. I really trust them. But how much confidence do you have that the thing you think about that is right? Right? How much confidence do you have that you're actually talking to Andy right now and not some deep fake AI? Right? Now, you know me well enough that you probably know it would be very hard to actually deep fake AI the quirks in my speech specifically. Somebody would have to be a very good voice actor and study me for a long time to be able to get that. But other than that, totally possible.
There will be some test questions coming up, so keep going.
I'm looking forward to it, Mr. Turin. So we can measure confidence, but we can't measure trust. And that's the problem with the name. And because trust is an emotion and is not something that's quantifiable, confidence can be quantified and measured and gauged as we move through interactions with systems. And so I agree with you completely. It's an evolution there. Go ahead. Keep going.
So the second thing I wanted to come back to in the whole notion of, imposter syndrome is, it's not bad to not be an expert or to not know everything. You know, it's really interesting when I talk to people outside of IT and cybersecurity, and they ask me about what I do. I often have a really hard time coming up with the words to describe it because we do use so much jargon. There are so many terms that are specific to the industry. But also, I think part of it is, you know, you say cybersecurity, and they may have some knowledge of cybersecurity. They may have heard a little bit, but cybersecurity is so wide. When you look at the breadth of things within the discipline, you know, it's enormous. I don't think there is anyone who's an expert in all things cybersecurity. So I think there's there needs to be a little bit of a cultural shift, and this is something I try to have for myself. Is it's okay to be in conversations where things come up that you don't know things about. You may not recognize the terms. It's a great opportunity to sit back and learn and to ask questions. I think, you know, one of the most flattering thing for most people is for you to ask them questions and want to hear back what they say. So that's something that I try to embrace. You know, there's plenty of things I don't know. There's more things that I don't know than I do know. So if I hear a term that I don't recognize, I think that's a great thing. Opportunity to learn something new.
I think I'm spoiled by the position of or progress point I am in my career. I don't know how to say it right, because I already have done and seen enough and have demonstrably done those things that I think I'm afforded the privilege, the latitude. It's not even just the privilege, but the latitude to ask questions about things that I don't know, where other people may fear that they don't have that latitude, or where people are not as willing to grant that same latitude, right? You and I, we're established. We already have a really good solid foundation under us that people have seen and is observable and verifiable. And so when we ask a question, it's just because, oh, that's not an area where we have zeroed in yet. But when a person who's only got 3 years of experience, but who just went through these certifications or something, right? I don't think people evaluate you and I and somebody with 15 to 25 years of experience asking a question the same way a more junior person gets evaluated. What do you think?
I think there's some truth to that, but I think that's an opportunity for us, especially being maybe the more senior people in the room, or at least the folks that have been around the block a few times, to encourage that. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, I'm continually blown away. I'm really lucky to have just a phenomenal team that I'm working with right now. And a couple of those team members are fresh out of college. We hired them fresh out of college. Now they've got a year or two of experience. And, you know, it's just amazing when they come in with the right attitude, and when they're put into an environment where asking questions is okay. And maybe it's more than okay, where it's encouraged. It's mm-hmm. incredible to see those people just take off, to just dig in. When they start to feel comfortable, they start to ask questions. You know, a lot of times the questions they ask come from a perspective that you and I, having been around the block for a couple of decades, may not occur to us.
Oh, and yeah. I don't even pretend to know all the new features in Active Directory since 2012, right? Yeah. No, Server 2012 was the last one I was physically in myself doing anything of substance. And even then, I had to Google it because the people I needed it done that day, and the people who usually did those things were out.
Google's a wonderful thing. But you know, there's one other thing I wanted to come back to on imposter syndrome. My third thing. Imposter syndrome, and I've actually shared this with a lot of my team members, especially some of the more junior ones. I actually think imposter syndrome can be a great thing. So when I look back to the early parts of my career, I remember that terror of like, gee, I'm the person in the room that knows the least, and you know, wondering how I made the cut to get here, you know, and how do I not get booted out of the room? Especially when the spotlight was going to be on you. You're going to present something, you're going to share something, you know, you're going to be up in front of the room. And so I think actually, and I think to this day I still do, imposter syndrome is something I've always had from day one. And a little bit of it, there's too much. I've seen people where they've got it where to the extent where it paralyzes them, and that can be a bad thing, obviously. But I think for a lot of people, recognizing that it's a relatively normal thing, and if it encourages you to be more prepared, if it encourages you to spend time the night before working up your notes, thinking about what you're going to say, if it encourages you to rehearse it a little bit more, it can actually help make you all that more successful. So yeah, I'm actually a little bit of a fan of imposter syndrome. I think it's a little bit of that negative stress that helps push you in the right direction. As long as it doesn't, again, get to the point where it's hurting your ability to perform.
Well, too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely. So back to our actual regularly scheduled agenda here. After imposter syndrome, and still relevant to community, and in fact, community is the third item on the 4 points of my list here, is relationships in cyber. I know this is something that you are very passionate about. In information security, in cybersecurity, relationships matter. They matter far more than so many other things. And so let's talk about relationships between teams first, and how I've got it. And we can break it out any way you want. I've got relationships with teams, relationships with vendors, relationships amongst the greater cyber community, right? Because you're facing things that somebody in Virginia is facing, that somebody in New York is facing, that somebody in Sacramento is facing. I picked those at random, but I also don't know why I went state, city, or state. Could be either, and city, right? Good transition there. One of each, and also then the business. I want to round out this discussion with the business, but teams, vendors, and community, I think are the nice ramp up to the business. If you agree with that order, let's power through.
Yeah.
Teams inside the same shop, and not all shops are organized the same way. Some have a CIO to whom the IT operations and the security folks answer. Others of them have a CIO and a CISO who are peers in the organization. Still others don't even have a CIO. They have a director of IT, depending on the size of the shop and maturity of the shop and the organization and the structure that is supporting all that stuff, who happens to handle security because voluntold, right? So let's talk about teams and what that means to you. And there's another team that I'll throw down too, is the HRIS team. The HR information systems team in a lot of organizations is separate, which is super interesting as well. So take it where you want to go.
Yeah, let me actually start with the cybersecurity team itself. So I consider myself incredibly fortunate. I've got a great team of about 30 people right now. All doing cybersecurity, and they're all at different parts of different levels of their career. We've got some folks that are entry level. We've got folks that are,
stage of career is the word I was looking for earlier. Why I couldn't find the stage, I don't know. Anyway, different stages in their career. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've got entry level folks, we've got mid-career folks, we've got people that have 20, 25, approaching 30 years of experience, and 30 people. It may sound like a lot, but that's a small enough team where you can know everyone really, really well. You can know all about, their personal life, and you can know about their strengths and their weaknesses. And, we definitely have to rely on each other. So I think, for me, the first thing is really making sure that we've got a strong team that sees themselves as a team. I'm actually enjoying my first vacation this year, and it's overdue. And that's actually something I wanted to come back to a little bit later is looking out for your team and taking care of yourself too, because I think it's really easy to not do that in cybersecurity. But being able to take a vacation, being able to make sure that when other people need to be out, that the team is there and can cover it. And wants to do that and is willing to do that, looks out for each other. I think that's super important. And I think parts of building that team, certainly you've got the layers of technical skills. You need people that are complementary to each other, and you need cross-training, you need to back each other up. But I think it's also super important that the team sees itself as a team. And so, coming back to that, one of the reasons I've been with SAIC for 21 years, and a lot of my colleagues that have been, with the company for the same thing, decades, a lot of it's about mission focus. It's about the team having a mission and being able to believe in that mission, understand why that mission is important. So for me, I think first and foremost, it is building that team that is more than just a group of people that kind of casually works in the same area. We're really here to accomplish something and really know what the meaning behind that is. We're really lucky. We've got a great mission. We support the state of Texas. As a Texas resident, knowing that we're contributing in some way to protecting the state against external threats, there's a lot of great meaning behind that. So I think, first and foremost, it is starting with your local team. In the situation that we're in, and I think this is increasingly common, we also work with other vendors. We're the cybersecurity vendor. I think it's increasingly common that you've got another vendor that may be doing application work, or you've got another vendor that's doing server work or storage or whatever it may be.
I don't want to treat those guys as other teams provided by vendors as opposed to vendors, because you work with your customers, other vendors, but you also have your own vendors with whom you work. And that's two separate dynamics I want to explore.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think that whether those other teams are different teams within your same company or organization, or whether they are in fact different vendors, I actually think that the behaviors and the way that you relate to them should be the same. At the end of the day, if they've got a different name on their paycheck, but they're aligned to the same mission, we all need to make sure that we are going to be successful. And so, one of the things I think is really interesting about cybersecurity is, it's unfortunate, but as a cyber, team, rarely are you bringing good news to other teams. When you're going to the server team, you're generally not congratulating them on being up to date with the latest patches that came out 4 hours ago from the vendors. It's more about, gee, these are the new threats that we have to deal with, and these are how urgent they are, and when can you, when
it's even worse than that when you have to go to them with an incident. When you show up and they either already know they have an incident, or they're not aware and you're the one telling them. Both are terrible. I've told a lot of people that I'm used to, and I still sometimes do, but not as much these days. I'm much more on the proactive side now. But I used to meet a whole lot of people on the worst day of their professional life.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
Absolutely. Yeah, cheers to that. And so, with that thought in mind, and it's also similar too with your executive team and with your business teams. You're generally not going to them to tell them, hey, everything's great. It is usually, here are the risks, here's the investment that I need, here are the help or the support that I need in other areas to address these things. So in all those cases, I think, to be able to work really effectively, knowing that you're often not the bearer of great news, having good relationships with all those parties, making sure they understand where you're coming from and why, and making sure that you are doing your best to understand their needs. It has to be a bi-directional relationship. When you always go to your executive team asking for money, you need to have a really good understanding of what other priorities your executive team is prioritizing you against, and be able to help frame that. I think it's also really important to help frame it in terms they understand. So, for me, I think relationships is so key in all those scenarios. We often have to interact at times where we're asking people to do things or asking things for them. And, to be successful in that, they need to have trust both ways, and need to have understanding and need to know each other.
Absolutely. So circling back to how you interact with various teams and the fact that you're usually not the harbinger of all things good news, how important or how often do you work in good news? How do you demonstrate wins, and how important is it to demonstrate wins? Because if you're only ever the harbinger of bad news, Absolutely. You start to erode the trust even when you've done nothing wrong.
I think one of the things that I found to be most effective is when I see team A do something good, some other team, I make sure that every other team knows about it. So when they see you out there publicly acknowledging and promoting the great things that they've done or the successes that they've had, that starts to build a little bit of a trust relationship that you are looking out for their interests as much as you're looking out for your own. So I think part of it is really, looking at ways that you can help other people. I think that's a real fundamental to building trust. It is recognizing that, we're not just here to get things from other people. It is working to understand what their needs are, what their motivations are, helping to promote them in a good light in front of other people, making sure that you're very free and active with doing that. And just like anything else, if there's a problem that needs to be addressed, you promote successes publicly, you deal with faults or failures privately. And I think that goes a very, very long way towards building working relationships that allow you to really be effective. One of the things I see in cybersecurity, for good and bad, it's one area that seems to attract a lot of really intelligent type A personalities. And what you have to be careful on is just, maybe you're the smartest person in the room, probably not, but maybe you're the smartest person in the room, but that doesn't mean that you're effective if you can't work with other people. So,
oh yeah, people skills are super important no matter how technical you are. There is that one exception to every rule that person really is so technical that they just avoid people, but accept work just fine. And if you are that person, you're still doing it right because you're not negatively impacting other people with your poor people skills, but you better be really, really good at that thing you do.
Steve Jobs was famous for being hard to work with and hard to argue with the success that he had. But yeah, he's absolutely the exception that proves the rule. There aren't too many Steve Jobs out there.
No, there definitely is not. And I would not have wanted to ride the elevator with him from what I hear.
It's funny you say that because I've heard that too.
Yeah, it's funny, but it's not a joke. So, all right. So teams, and there's all kinds of different teams, and those can be the teams provided by other vendors, but working towards the same mission. Those can be the teams spread out amongst your clients. That can be the inter-team dynamics on your own, because you may have some people working in security operations, running down alerts and doing threat hunting and whatnot. But you also have people who are doing the vulnerability management program, who are doing notifications and communications. You have other people who are monitoring policies and tracking security baselines and doing controls, the GRC work that has to get done, that pays really well and nobody really wants to do except for also that one person who really loves doing it, right? And all these guys who have to fit together to become a team, so that together when they are a team can work with all of those other teams. So that's teams. Did we boil the ocean on teams?
I think so.
We'll probably come back. So let's talk about vendors, because every single separate team there has vendors of their own. So your partners that you work with at the other silos in the state, they all have their own vendors. You, as one of the silos, provide, and I've read the contract, so I know what the silos are for some reason. And so you have your own vendors, and everybody's got their own vendors. How do you manage, and it's not just in the case of your current operations, right? Because this is a concern for everybody. It's a concern for me right now. I have vendors that I partner with. I have vendors for reselling and working together at a client. We have a shared mission at a client, but I also have vendors who sell me things that I use as a direct customer. Yep. And sometimes we do both, which is a unique and interesting relationship. But the relationship is sometimes a little more tense than I would prefer. So talk to me about vendor relations and how important that is and how you manage it.
Yeah. So, certainly vendor relationships are critical. There's, looking back to being able to deliver full scope services in some way, shape, or form. All of us depend on a network of vendors and supply chain. I'm sitting here right now. I'm on my Microsoft computer. I've got Zoom up with you. I've got some other applications running in the background. to do work, we need to rely on vendors. And I think it's important, first of all, I think you have to categorize your vendors as to what kind of a relationship do you need with them. And by that, I mean, there are absolutely those things that are commodity. I use Microsoft Windows every day and I love it. And I would have a really hard time doing my job without it. My relationship with Microsoft as a company is pretty non-existent because it's a commodity product and I can go get the product through any number of resellers. And, the level of relationship there doesn't really impact my use and effectiveness.
This is where I say Microsoft is not a sponsor of this podcast, but you could be.
Well, and I love Microsoft products and I always use them, but I don't need that relationship to be able to get, Windows 11. I can run down to Best Buy, I can go to Amazon, no problem there. On the other end of the spectrum, I've got vendors where the technology platform, particularly some of these SaaS platforms that I use, the ability to have a strong vendor relationship is critical to success because I need them to keep up with compliance. I need to know about what they're doing to evolve their product line and how that's going to change and how I'm going to use it in the future. I need to have that great relationship because when there are major bugs, and there always are, I need to be able to get the attention of their development community to either get patches or get upgrades or fixes or whatever. So I think there's a whole continuum there. I think, first and foremost, when I look at vendors, I try to put them into a bucket. Is it commodity and someone that, it's a product that I use and I'm reliant on, but I've got options, I don't really need a relationship. And I think there's some middle ground, but all the way up through strategic relationships where maybe we're going to market together. Maybe we're really codependent on being able to deliver a solution based on what they're doing from a development perspective. So for me, that's kind of where it starts, is driving the level of engagement and relationship that we have. And then from there, back to relationship, it is finding vendors that are willing to get to know you and get to know your needs and your business as much as, you're willing to put into getting to know how best to implement their product or services to get what you need out of it. If you don't have that bi-directional relationship, you really run the risk of a one-sided relationship where there's misunderstandings, where there's divergence in outcomes and needs. It just doesn't quite have the longevity or the value that we like to get. So I actually have a question for you on vendors.
Please do, yes.
So not too long ago, I saw a LinkedIn post, maybe a rant, one might say. I wonder if you could share a little bit about your vendor experience.
Sure. So the rant you're referring to is the one that went somewhat broader than I was expecting for something I penned in anger at 11 something, right? Yeah, no, it struck a nerve. And I will say that most people were empathetic. One person from a company that I actually do partner with, who I don't work with specifically, and I found to be very interesting, but won't name yet, made a response of, you could just ignore the email. And for the record, I did just ignore the email. I just didn't ignore the topic. I have not responded to the vendor. So what the rant was about, and it was self-titled as a rant, but the rant was about a salesperson who had never taken the time to actually reach out to me on LinkedIn, do any research or anything like that. I don't know how I got on his list or anything like that. I probably attended a conference where they were. Not sure I even talked to the people in the booth. Some conferences provide your contact information. And I know that bothers a lot of people. It doesn't actually bother me. There is a transactional, if the conference is cheap to attend, you're paying somehow, right? So I don't know how I got on their list, but for 11 days, I was receiving every couple days an email from this person. And on the 12th day, not even 2 full weeks in, I received basically a message that said, it's clear to me that you are either just too busy or don't care about security. Either way, I'll go ahead and close out your account. My first response was, I don't have an account. You can't close it out. right? We've never met and I don't do business with you. And I now I probably never will. And my second one was, I know that somebody told this person or they self-motivated into it, which would be worse, or maybe it's not worse because the other one is systemic, to accuse me of not caring about my job and the implications of it as a way to get an emotional response to me. Remember, trust is emotion. There are other emotions as well. As a way to get an emotional response from me to try to get me to engage, even if I'm just telling him to F off, which I wouldn't do in writing. But I posted about it on LinkedIn, and that post has gotten a lot more traction than I ever expected it to, because people post rants all the time, right? There's all kinds of this stuff out there. I'm not the only one who's ever done this, but as of right this moment, that post has been up for about 36 hours and has 28,053 views.
And at least one like from me.
And at least one like from you. And that was, you know, I'm a CISO. You are de facto a CISO in what you do. There are, I think your actual HR title is different. And actually my HR title is different too, right? I run a whole lot of different things. My calendar is ridiculous. The only way I even carve out time to do this podcast is by booking it out weeks in advance. And you had to take a vacation to be able to get the time to do it.
Glad to do it. It was worth it.
And I'm glad you're here too. It's good to see you. But so a mere 11 days in, I get this accusatory breakup letter, for lack of a better word. And it just really rubbed me the wrong way. And it is indicative of everything that's wrong with the sales-driven approach as opposed to the problem-solving driven approach. And I get that cold calling and cold emails and trying to get me to say, hey, how you doing? Yeah, let's talk the first time is super hard. But if you want to reach people who are super busy, it's going to take more than 11 days. And the thing is, here's the thing, and I hope this person figures out who they are and listens to this at some point, because I was 3 days out from reaching out. It was already on my calendar.
Well, I think it's a story, you know, when I first read it, you know, the first thing I said was, this has happened to me. And it sounds like 28,000 other people read it and said, this has happened to me. And so, you know, I think two things. I think we all have those interactions. One of my pet peeves is the automated emails. It's the one like, hey, you didn't respond to my first email, so I'm responding again. Let me invite you to schedule something on my calendar. You know, coming from a salesperson, you know, I may have some pet peeves about that. Some are more egregious than others. But I think the notion is not to call out any individuals or any companies. You know, I had a really interesting experience at the recent information security forum. It was great to interact with all kinds of people, other vendors and customers, and you know, just folks that, you know, are in the community. And a vendor came up to me, the company I know, I did not know the salesperson, introduced himself. We chatted, you know, small talk for a minute or two. And I asked what I thought was a relatively softball question about his product, just in the interest of being friendly and chatty. And he stopped, and funny enough, he said, whoa, you used a lot of jargon in that sentence. And the jargon I used was encryption and key vault, which are really relevant to this product suite. Don't think those are in an information security forum.
That doesn't narrow it down too far either. So you haven't called anybody out. You're good.
Haven't called anyone out. This wasn't a baseball game. This was an information security forum. So those terms, you know, I don't know that I would call those jargon. And he said, I don't know. I'll have to get my techies to find out, but I'll do that. And I have to say, it was just a huge turnoff, because this person didn't know the basics of their product line, but were trying to sell me. And, you know, I'll say, to this person's credit, they did go back and got the answer from me and emailed it in about 3 hours. But, you know, it left me with a negative impression that if you don't have the time to learn about your product, to even describe it at a high level, and you're trying to sell it to me, how can I expect you to understand my needs if you don't even understand your product? And again, I share that in the same vein as your LinkedIn post, not to shame that individual vendor, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about these experiences to maybe raise the awareness with the sales community. You and I both have a sales component to our job. I think that's part of our life. And I think if we can help raise the bar on effective sales, that's good for everyone. I absolutely depend on my vendor community. I know you do as well. I want to have good relationships. I don't want to get frustrated with bad experiences like that. Best thing is to let those emails slide off my back. But would love to have more meaningful conversations with some of these vendors. And it's just going to be precluded when the tactics are, that basic. So,
and there's other folks who aren't using those tactics who are getting the meetings. How often do you meet with vendors who approach you and try to talk to you?
So
they're all trying to sell to you. So I didn't use that word. They're all trying to talk to you though. How often?
I'll give you two answers. So I probably talk to a vendor about once a week.
Mm-hmm.
I'm mostly operational, but I probably talk to a vendor about once a week. Here's the funny thing. I would love to be able to spend a day a week talking to vendors. I actually love talking to vendors and making the time. I learn a lot. It's an opportunity to see what else is out there, exchange information and ideas. And so I think the real key is making sure that you find those people where the relationship is bi-directional, where hopefully they can get something from you. And that's not always a sale. Maybe it's a sale in 6 months, maybe it's a sale in 6 years. But I think the good vendors recognize the value of the relationship and keeping in touch.
100%. So I just checked my calendar. That's what I'm looking over here for. And I actually have 3 vendor meetings with vendors that I don't currently work with that I'm interested in, who found a way to come at me correctly and slip in between the cracks, of both proper procedure, if you will, and interest. And so I have 3 vendor meetings this week, and I schedule a demo hour once a week on Tuesdays at 11, just in case that's Central Time, just in case anybody out there is actually listening to this and wants to throw your hand in the air for one of these slots. Every Tuesday at 11 Central Time, I invite some vendor somewhere of some type to come in and talk to my entire team.
That's a great idea.
Because I believe you're welcome to join mine.
I may do that.
I believe that it is the right way to keep the team at large exposed to the huge number of personalities and the huge diversity of products and use cases that are out in the market. And even if we never end up doing business, sometimes these are leading edge, bleeding edge companies who are not mature. They're not enterprise ready yet. That's a leader, by the way. They're not enterprise ready yet. And we give them as much feedback as we can. And we say, reschedule with us in a quarter or in 6 months to visit with us again, because we really like your foundation, but it's missing these things before we can really take it to enterprise. You're ready for a down market, small business customer, but you're not ready for enterprise or whatever the gap is. And we'll help them develop because it takes a community. But to come in and within 11 days say, hey, you didn't respond to me, so you must just not like your job. You don't like security. You don't care about it. It's just not the right way to approach people, especially if they actually care, which is what pissed me off so much.
Yeah. Take that a step farther, especially thinking about the demo days too. The best vendors that I've worked with take that input, take what they're hearing about what your real world needs and applications are, and incorporate that back into their development pipeline. It's not immediate. Sometimes it's months, sometimes it's years down the road, but being able to leverage that in a bi-directional manner, I think is really important to make sure that you've got value for both parties.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really interested in segmentation technologies right now. And there's a segmentation technology vendor out there who could be a sponsor too, and then I'd name you, who is really doing it right. They are out there seeking feedback, looking to refine, and then acting on that feedback and coming back every 2 to 5 months, depending on the feedback they received, and saying, hey, can you look at us again and give us more? Because that was good. And I know we're not the only team giving them feedback. These guys are doing it right, and they are out there. I hope we're not the only ones. We can't be, because they improve more than what we tell them in between, right? And so they're getting customer feedback, but they action on it, and they come back and they follow up. And I like it.
It's funny you should mention that. So I actually have a micro segmentation solution. We do not do a lot of products, but we do a little bit. So I'll have to get on your demo day on on 11 o'clock and give you a tour.
Fantastic. Let's set that up. See, this right here, relationships. Michael and I have known each other.
Your needs. Yeah.
Exactly. And Michael and I have known each other for years. Who knows? This might be the next business we do together. But this is how it happens: is you build a relationship, you maintain the relationship, and that relationship is not contingent on money trading hands. And it survives. If I leave this role or he leaves that role, our relationship survives that transition. And yours should too. If you're doing it right, and if you're doing it right, it will. Actually, I'll call out two folks who are just really doing it right from a sales perspective, who are in competing spaces. They work at competing customers or companies, and they both do it fantastically. And that's Sean Levesque and Brad Booth are two phenomenal examples of relationships and people first, who both represent great technologies. And I won't name where they're from, both because they're not customers. You guys can look them up if you want, but not sponsors. I'm in customer centric mode. They're not sponsors of the show, but also because this needs to be evergreen content. And while they may not always work at their current companies, I know I can count on them to carry forward those relationships wherever they go. And the skills and the network that they bring is going to follow them no matter where they work.
Couldn't agree with that more. Funny enough, when you were starting that intro, before you named the names, Brad's name popped in my head.
There you go.
I met Brad when he was at his previous company, and saw him go through the transition, saw him maintain the same relationships, same kind of attitude, and couldn't agree more. I think people that have that type of approach, really to just operating in the industry, that kind of relationship approach to life, are the people that I'm generally going to do business with and keep in contact with and be friends with.
100%. Yeah. These are people that I would have to my house and have had to my house. Actually, both of them. I've had them both to my house, right? These are people I would have to my house. And if you had moved in a time where it wasn't the pandemic, I'd have you to my house too. The pandemic's over. Come on down.
Did you move all the couches in yet?
The couches are in.
Okay, then we can get something scheduled.
Perfect.
As long as the heavy lifting is passed.
Oh no, all we've got left. Like here, I'll slide the camera over. We've got some boxes left. Some of my office is still in boxes. Wow. I just, for anybody who's listening to audio, I panned the camera over to the boxes in the corner that are strategically left out of the frame. So, it's relationships and maintaining those relationships and putting the people aspect first is easily the most critical component, because the tech is going to change. It changes every day, but the need to maintain relationships does not. So for the record, that soapbox was your fault. You brought that up.
Glad to help. Glad to contribute.
Absolutely. So let's move to business, because we talked about teams, and these are generally, we kind of relegated the decision to teams of delivery. We didn't talk about the teams like the finance team at the customer, the finance team on our side, the places where the money meets the road, which is where the metal meets the road. So how do you work with the business?
Yeah. So, really for me, the fundamental approach is the same. And that is working to understand as much about their day-to-day life and what things are easy and what things are hard for them as possible. Finance is a great example. So going back, I don't know, 15 years ago, I didn't know all that much about budget cycles. I knew that things got paid for, that I would make recommendations up the chain. I maybe would prioritize things, but I didn't really have an appreciation for how much chaos some of those requests may have caused until I got more involved in the budgeting process. And then when you start to understand that, companies and organizations just don't have an unlimited bank account to draw upon, and they just can't easily take money from one place to another place, really understanding how they budget, what the expectations are around that budget. Every good budget has some component of unknown. Every good budget has some component or maybe some strategy about whether they would prefer to invest in capital that's going to go on their books and they're going to have to depreciate, or do they have a strategy about moving more things to expense? Understanding what's important to them, and then being able to adapt your part of the business, your requests, the information that you feed to them, adapting it to them to demonstrate that respect and understanding, to say, hey, I understand how this works, or I think I do. If I don't get this right, please explain it to me. But, showing that you care about the impact that you're having on them and that you're trying to make them successful too. Just like, we have our job in cybersecurity, it's to protect and be compliant. They have their job. Their job is to forecast profitability and to, make sure that the books survive audit and are able to pass and all those things. So, for me, it's again, back to understanding how you can help other people. And that often means learning about different parts of the business. One of the things I did a few years ago is I went back to school, and one of the things I specifically did was take accounting classes. And, by no means am I an accountant. I still use TurboTax to do my taxes, but that was money well spent and time well spent to be able to understand how accounting works and how finance works. So that's my big takeaway. It is really putting yourself in the other party's shoes, making sure that you understand as much about it as you can, and let them know that you care about it. Ask questions, ask them to validate your understanding.
And let them know you took the time to learn something about it. Not just that you care, but that you learn. And that goes back, right? Yeah. Actually, that's a similar thing to the salespeople. Take your time to learn about the company and the other teams. You take the time to learn how they're approaching things and what problems they're facing. Learn about them and demonstrate understanding, and that builds that trust. And I feel like we're kind of seeing a theme come through throughout our conversation now. And there's the only add-on I have for what you said was yes. And in my time and observation / preaching from the mountain, sometimes mission always comes first. Whether that mission is to make money in the private sector, or whether it's to deliver specific goods, services, or whatnot to the public with using tax funds, or whether it's to protect and serve for the police, or to be able to rapidly respond to critical incidents and fires for fire and EMS. Whatever the mission is, it always comes first. If you work at Ford, the mission is to get the cars off the line and into the lot. If you work at IBM, that's a bad example. IBM does everything. If you work at an SC Johnson, a family company, the mission is to get those products to market and to help the consumer solve their problems that the products are supposed to solve. You can't sell defective or dangerous products. They have to do what they're supposed to do and not get people killed while they do them. And if they are going to get people killed, they better come with good labels, right? Of how not to get yourself killed with the product. That's the mission. And in government, since you're working to support government right now, and I have a background in government, the mission comes first, and law enforcement is the easiest one to understand. Why doesn't law enforcement prioritize cybersecurity when it is such a scourge? Well, I'll tell you what, because if you have the choice as a police officer between the budget going to buy new bulletproof vests or the budget going to buy a new firewall, you choose vests every time because you understand the material link to personal officer safety, life and death consequences on the street, potentially. Now, your feelings about law enforcement or anything else like that are immaterial because this is inside at the moment about the mission and about what they prioritize. Now, cybersecurity has a very real personal public safety implication. The ransomware incident in 2019 has been widely publicly acknowledged in the state of Texas. 23 cities got hit, and there was a very clear and distinct public safety nexus. That cyber attack took out the SCADA systems that monitored and controlled the automatic functions that govern the water systems in 2 of those towns. Cybersecurity has a very real public safety nexus. Cybersecurity could expose the locations of police cars and allow them to get ambushed if it's not in place. Having lax cybersecurity could allow an attacker to take over a car that was built in just the right year with just the right vulnerability because they're rolling data centers. They're networks that, to start with, when we started adding all the computers to them, were just unsegmented networks that gave critical vehicle controls the same priority as the entertainment center and the remote modem and all those other things. Mission comes first. Business comes first. And if you can learn to understand the mission and how you support the mission, then you aren't in security anymore. Your internal job is security, but you help support the secure delivery of the mission. You make sure the mission is accomplished in the securest possible fashion that allows the mission to happen.
Yeah, couldn't agree with that more. I think I would say 2 things to that. I think in some of the highest performing organizations, you see that the organization has a clear mission, and within the organization, they have a great structure and framework for how each part of the organization, whether that's IT or cyber or finance or manufacturing or fill in the blanks, how that piece supports the mission. So I think it's understanding how your part of the business supports that overall mission, but it often has relationships again to other parts. So maybe I'm in the protect and comply area, but to be able to be successful in my part of fulfilling the mission, I need to get adequate budget. I need to understand how those budget cycles work, need to get the requests in a timely way and all that. But the second thing I would mention there too is, I think it's scary, but it's a reality that cybersecurity, you mentioned, life and safety. Absolutely. And for some organizations, cyber is actually an existential threat. There was an incident not that long ago where a college institution, a university that had been in operation for more than 100 years, had to close up shop due to a ransomware attack.
I'll name them so you can find them. That's Lincoln University.
Yep.
Lincoln University, combo platter of the pandemic, hurting enrollment, which is natural, and almost every organization, higher education institution across the country had to find its own way to deal with that. But then ransomware put them over the edge.
Absolutely. Made it unable for them to contact students, to interact, to basically run their business. No students, no tuition, no funding, no organization. So, really sad that this organization that had been around for longer than any of us was unable to continue on due to that ransomware attack.
And was the namesake for the president and in his home state.
Yeah. Yep.
It's tragic. Now, it was a private institution, and there's always risk, and all good things come to an end, but it didn't have to end like that.
Speaking of ransomware, recently at the 2022 Information Security Forum, I had the pleasure of being able to be a panel moderator for the day 2 keynote panel. And on the panel, we had 3 folks. It was Stephen Pryor from the Department of Transportation. It was Henry Rose from Prairie View A&M, and it was Brad Stewart from the Lufkin Integrated School District. And the topic was incident response in state and local government. And so in planning for the keynote panel, we got together a few times, we talked about their experience, and we mock walked through what we were going to talk about. And what I thought was really interesting was a couple of things. One, all three of them, their major cybersecurity impact over the last couple of years was a major ransomware event. So certainly, there's plenty of other attacks that are out there right now. Nation state activity is kind of off the charts at the moment, especially with
others that are more common, like business email compromise is the most common and most likely to cost your organization money, but rarely does it represent an existential threat.
Yep. But impact ransomware across the board. We keep hearing it over and over and over again, with Lincoln University shutting down, with the experience in 2019. And what I thought was really interesting too in listening to them was at least two of them had significant impacts that were outside of traditional IT systems. So, as a cybersecurity person, we often think about data, we think about, compliance and protection. But some of the things that they shared, which I thought was just fascinating, was the shutdown of their HVAC systems, because that was all dependent on the network. The inability to use their door key card system. And in fact, the inability to recover it because the company had gone out of business a year or two ago. So they couldn't even go back and get the software and get the things they needed to reinstall it. So yeah, really, really interesting. Ransomware, I think, is definitely on my top list. Although, as you say, phishing, business email compromise, and certainly what we're seeing with reconnaissance activity over the last 6-8 months, definitely a high threat environment.
100%. Yeah, I know about some of the stuff that went on at a couple of those organizations, and they were bad. So something you said about strategic partnerships earlier, which programs are commodity, which software is commodity, which services are just okay, repeatable, I can buy that from anywhere, versus there's the middle ground, or the ones who are like truly strategic. That's an example of a time where it might be important to really evaluate what is and is not strategic. And is your software that runs your card, key, and door access strategic or commodity? Because if it's strategic, consider what happens when that company goes out of business. Like, I don't think anybody is realistically including in their threat model what happens if Microsoft goes out of business. I don't think that's really being considered, because what happens if Microsoft goes out of business tomorrow wholesale is the entire IT field community discipline and delivery gets turned on its head, right? That's an existential risk for millions of systems across the world, if not billions. However, should you be taking into account the and there's calculus that goes into making that determination, that we're not really considering it because of the high unlikelihood and the alternative, the existential risk. Like, it's outside of our control. We can't stop it from happening. And if it does happen, everything goes sideways, right? You can calculate the burn rate to going sideways, and maybe that'd be a great exercise for a disaster recovery team out there, right? What's the burn rate? How long do we have before things just go completely upside down if Microsoft goes under tomorrow? Right? What's that look like? It's a great doomsday scenario to explore that's highly unlikely, so nobody's actually going to catch blame in that scenario, which is always a nice bonus when you're going through a tabletop exercise scenario or something like that. But your other strategic systems, the ones who are very critical, like your door system, you should be exploring alternatives for what, or exploring the scenarios of what they went away looks like. So a code escrow would have been great in this scenario, right? So yeah, we are more than happy to contract with you, but you need to put your code in escrow of the versions that we have, so that in the event that you go under,
we've got an option.
We're protected and we have an out, and we can reinstall the software and take it over and maintain it if you go under. Because it's again, if you go under.
Yeah, and I totally agree with all of that. And, funny enough, the other thing, this kind of brings us all the way back to where we started today. The other big takeaway I had from the panel was relationships. So in every one of their cases, they talked about the external resources that were used as part of their response and recovery, whether that was an incident response vendor, whether that was other parts of the greater organization, whether it was outside sources that came in and contributed. And so that was a really, I think, important part to the story, which was, you have to build those relationships before you need them. And that, again, that goes within your team, with other teams that you relate to. One of the big questions I had for them was, how was your relationship with your executive team before, during, and after? And fortunately for all of them, they had good relationships going into it. So there was a level of trust and understanding that when they did have to communicate with them, to use your words, Andy, probably on the worst day of their life, they were able to have the support that they needed, and they were able to do the job that they needed to do to recover. And interestingly enough, in all three cases too, they all shared that, there was a golden period after recovery where investment in cybersecurity was easier to get approved than it had been previously. And that was something that they were able to take advantage of. Certainly we don't want to have to go through that to be able to get investment dollars, but I think it goes back to that relationship and being effective. It is.
And look, if you do get hit, never let a good crisis go to waste.
Right.
Seriously, don't let a good crisis go to waste. Use it to get the resources you need. If you were under-resourced beforehand, or if the organization just couldn't see its way forward to getting rid of those NT 4.0 boxes, I'm going to pick something that literally nobody should ever have anymore. Environments, right? Getting rid of those NT 4.0 boxes just couldn't happen until just now because of ransomware, when we were forced to realize we can live without it. Don't let that go to waste. Otherwise, it'll be till the next time before you can do that stuff, make progress.
I think that's the real key to being successful in cybersecurity. It is, it's a job like a lot of jobs where when things are kind of going okay, it's not too hard to get by and be successful. But I think to really be successful in cybersecurity, you need to be that person where when things do go wrong, you're the person that other people want to have around.
We're back to trust. Lots of circles around here. And also, I think there's going to be a theme, partially because I'm involved in all the discussions, but throughout the entire series so far, there's been trust has been mentioned quite a bit. Relationships have gotten touched on, though not with the focus that we've given it today, right? Because relationships are ultimately the focus of today's talk, whereas we've talked about other things like partnerships and zero trust and a whole bunch of other things, incident response and entrepreneurship and all kinds of stuff. And it's a theme that has emerged over time, and that is, I think, telling, because no matter what subject we're talking about, almost without exception, it sneaks into the discussion. Could be my fault since I'm involved in all the discussions.
Gee, is there a commonality in all of these podcasts? Right. What could that be?
Right. What is that? So when we were talking in advance of the discussion and relevant to incident response, because that's where it becomes super critical, is the self-awareness / team awareness to remember to take care of yourself. In cybersecurity, we have a whole bunch of people who wear S's on their chest and want to charge in and solve the problem. And no, I can do this. We've got systems administrators who just, they're like, yes, I can power through this and we can knock this out. It's 3 days of work. I just won't sleep. No. So talk to me about, let's take care of our teams first.
Yeah.
How do you take care of your team and make sure that they're not supermanning everything, building single points of failure, which is what happens when you Superman everything, and generally leading to burnout and discontent? How do you keep that from happening?
Yeah, that's a great topic. So, I think a couple of things. I actually read an article really recently. I think it was probably in the Rotman Management Journal. but it was more of a business question. And the business question was, since this whole era of COVID, which hopefully we are past now, but we've seen some long-standing changes to the way that we work. A lot of teams, my team included, still has some elements of being remote workers, in some cases 100%. So in our industry, I think we've seen a large shift from people mostly working in an office to a lot of things are still 80% remote, sometimes 100% remote. And the question in this article was around working from home and whether you had context separation between when you're working and when you're not. And so I'm coming to you from my kitchen right now. I am on vacation today, but this is where I usually work. And sometimes I'll sit on the other side of the table and you'll see a different background. But I spend a large part of my days, whether that's a Saturday personal day or a Monday through Friday work day, in the same 6-8 foot area. This is where my computers are. This is where I do my personal web surfing and looking at the news, and this is where I work. And so, one of the things they talked about a lot was this notion of whether you have context of when you're working or not. And the interesting thing, and I think I can really relate to this, is something like 38% or less felt they had separation between when they're working and when they're not working. I'll tell you, my personal opinion is there's a little bit of good there, like anything else, if you balance it. So what I found is, sometimes for me, and I try to have open conversations about this with my colleagues and with my team, so they can think about how they react and how this applies for them. Sometimes, if I need to conceptualize something for work, I almost need to have a little bit of a distraction. If I just sit and look at a blank PowerPoint slide, I have a really hard time coming up with that graphic that I need for a presentation.
The tyranny of the blank page is real for me.
Yeah, but if I go walk around the block, for an hour or half an hour, and think about it and get some scenery, I can usually come up with that concept, come back and bang it out. So, one, it's recognize where are you working and where are you not? And I think it's legitimate, if you're legitimately, walking around the block, but you're thinking about work and thinking about how you're going to get that thing done, that counts as work time. So I think you need to think a little bit about how you work and how you be effective, because the name of the game is being effective. Me sitting in a chair and staring at a blank PowerPoint for 2 hours before I can, get over my PowerPoint writer's block, is that better because I was sitting in a chair? Or if it takes me 30 minutes of walking and now 15 minutes of transposing those ideas into PowerPoint, it's more efficient and effective. That's a good thing. But I think it comes back to recognizing context and being able to make sure that you have a way to separate yourself. One of the things that we're encouraging people to do more and more and more is to be flexible. So within our company, we're really lucky. We've got the ability, we can do 980s, we can do 410s, we can do all these different things. Within our team, what we've kind of landed on is do your work, do your job. If for you need to take a break from noon to 2 o'clock because you like to go fill in the blank, do XYZ, that's when you like to go for a bike ride, or that's when you want to go shopping or whatever, that's great. If someone else wants to work, 410s because they like having every Friday or every Monday or something else off, that's great. So I think it's looking for ways to make sure that we can capitalize on the modern work environment to make people's time off more meaningful. And I think it's also making sure that you're looking out for each other to make sure that they can take time off. We've had a couple of people, and I know everyone's known people like this. They feel like they can't take time off because they feel like they're the only ones that can do fill in the blank. And so
there's a lot of teams where that is sort of true. And it's up to, that's where we come in. It's up to management to help make sure that you're not turning any of your people into a single point of failure. If you're single threaded in a critical thing that happens on a schedule or could break the organization if something happens while you're out, that's not the employee's fault.
Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And, sometimes I think it's important too. Ultimately as managers, we work for our employees. Let's face it, if our team members weren't here, then the job's not getting done. So the most important thing I can do is to make sure that my team is effective, whether that is cross-training, making sure they're taking time off, making sure that we're being flexible so they can be happy in their personal life and get the things done that they need to get done. I think that's really important. And it kind of goes back to the notion of, in general, think about how you can help other people, whether that's helping your finance department or helping your team members, do what they need to do and like to do to rest and recharge.
Internally at our company, we have a culture of people first. And we actually couch our culture in two different phrases. One is from a delivery perspective, we are ruthlessly focused on the customer success. And that can mean a lot of different things. And we have a huge variety of customers, just like you do in your overall business. And actually in your supportive state, you have a huge variety of customers. They just all happen to be government entities. But we also are people first. Like, you are not expected to come in and put in 8 hours a day if you're sick. You are expected to take a vacation. You've worked here for a year and you haven't taken a vacation. We term out our vacation. Like, you can only accrue up to 4 total weeks because we want you to take it so it starts accruing again. You got to take a vacation. Even me, I got to take a vacation periodically. And another thing I've learned, no matter what stage of your career you're in, everybody has a boss. So even my boss, the last time I took some days off, of course, work interrupted because we're a high growth company in a high growth stage. And so work interrupted my vacation. And the first thing he said to me was, "How was your vacation?" And, I said, "Okay, cool. I'll just take back the hours I got stomped on. No big deal." And he said, "And my next question is, when are you scheduling your next vacation? Schedule it now so that it happens, because I'm a workaholic. Everybody who works with me or knows me more than a little while in a professional context knows I'm a workaholic. And it's a thing. I don't know that it's a bad thing, because I am surrounded by the right system of people who are making sure that I keep a work-life balance. And that's my job with my team, right? I rely on other people to help keep me grounded, and it's my job to focus on keeping my team good, keeping them healthy. So how do you, on your first vacation, and you're here with me, how do you remember to take care of you?
Yeah, so I think for me, I sleep best when I've got a comfort level that the mission's going to be accomplished. So, I think for a lot of things, it's not an either or. It's not either how do I look out for myself or how do I make sure the team is able to function without me, or how do I make sure that nothing bad's going to happen when I'm taking a few days off. The biggest thing that I think you have to recognize is it can be complex to figure out how to satisfy all those things. And that's our job as managers, to deal with complexity. So, for me, part of it was making sure that I've got a team that I can trust, making sure that they've got all the support and development that they need to be successful. And then, I have to admit, you said you're a workaholic, and, I may have heard that once or twice. And is that a bad thing? I think it's also important to look at each person as an individual. Here we are, I'm on vacation today. We're talking cybersecurity. There is nowhere I'd rather be right now. I'm looking forward to riding my motorcycle in an hour or two, but I was more looking forward to this podcast because it's something that I really enjoy. And so I think you also have to look at every individual. Is it okay for some people to work 40 hours and some people to work 50 hours? Yeah, But I think what you have to do is constantly have dialogue with those people and say, are you able to do the things that you want to do? I mean, are you working these extra hours because you feel like you have to, or because it's things you enjoy? And so I have that dialogue with myself. At what point do I have diminishing returns on putting in hours? I love the mission that we have. It's a mission that I really believe in. I'd love working with the team, and that makes it a lot easier to maybe put in a lot of hours. I really enjoy cybersecurity. I think it's a meaningful thing, and it's a lot of fun, and it's interesting. And there needs to be some balance there. So I do think the scheduling in advance is really good advice too. One thing I know I'm bad at is looking out at the calendar 2 months, 3 months and saying, yeah, I should probably schedule a weekend off. I should probably schedule a week off here and there. I think that's really good and important advice. Put it on the calendar. If you need to adjust it when it gets closer, you can adjust it. But at least putting the intent out there and planning for it helps get you into that mode and helps get you ready to take that time off.
It also sets the expectation with everybody else who can see your calendar, and it helps set an example that it's okay to take a break.
I think that's an important point. I think what we say as leaders and what we do really need to be aligned. So when you tell everybody you need to take time off, you need to take a break, but you're the person that never does that, yeah, you're sending mixed messages there.
Totally. So, and actually in that vein, I'll use a real example. Next week, we have a really big day on next Wednesday. I don't want to use dates because hopefully this is an evergreen podcast, but next Wednesday is a really big day for us. And I'm not going to be there because I have a fishing trip that I take every year. And my number two, my senior director of technology, he's not going to be there either because he and I have been working together in multiple shops across many years and have become really good friends. And this is the day that he and I have taken off for many years now to go fishing. And it is our fishing day, and the boat is already paid for, and we are going. And it was scheduled months ago. And just because Wednesday turned into a big day, we're still going, and everybody else understands and supports it.
Yeah, that's great. And if next Wednesday, so if you're talking about the event that I'm thinking of, I'll actually be at that event and I'll make you a deal. I'll take pictures of the event if you take pictures of the fishing.
I am not at that event, but I will trade you pictures.
Okay, that sounds like a deal.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's not the event I'm talking about. Although I am going to RSA if you're going.
I am not scheduled for RSA yet.
If you're going to get scheduled, you better get scheduled soon because hotels are insane right now.
It's definitely event season. This month, next month, and July, it's events.
So we have covered almost everything on our agenda. There's only one thing left. Do you remember what it is?
Pressure. I don't.
It's a three-parter.
Uh-oh. Vaporware.
Enterprise readiness, or just over-promising on sales. So there's a huge thing that goes on, and each one of those terms has specific meanings depending on who you are listening. So I'm going to start in the middle, and that's enterprise readiness. There's a whole lot of products out there that are fantastic. They do great things. They do the thing that they do, possibly the best, but they've been bolting on other things they do. And the more things they bolt on, the more air quotes get put in the air around it. They do these things. And so even though they were a point solution that did one thing fantastically, they tried to make the move into being an enterprise ready product and just didn't quite make the mark. And then there's the folks who sell you on the roadmap but never deliver. That's called vaporware, where we promise you that this product will do a thing. We promise you that we have solved this problem. Just buy the software and find out. And then it just never quite works. And then there's another problem, which is the software is fully baked. It's enterprise ready. It is not vaporware, but somebody still BS's their way into the deal by promising that it does things that it doesn't do, which I separate from vaporware, because vaporware is a category I use to describe overblown claims that can never be true across the board by the company, even in their marketing material, as opposed to, yes, if you had read the manual in advance, or assuming the documentation was any good to begin with, because it's often not. But if you had read the manual or read the marketing cut sheet, the answers to your questions of what it doesn't do were actually in there. But the salesperson had charisma, had made it through the gauntlet we discussed earlier, had made it into the room and had sold the product, but had sold it based on it doing things that it doesn't really do. Vaporware, enterprise readiness, and overpromising in sales. Go.
Yeah. I'd add a few dimensions to that too. So, especially when you're talking about enterprise ready, one of the things that I found really interesting lately is with all of the acquisitions and consolidations that we've seen in the industry over the last 5-10 years, you often also end up with organizations that have multiple products in their portfolio, and they may all have the same branding now, but they started off at different organizations. And the result is, while they may have the same branding, they've got almost no commonalities, no interoperability, no things that you would expect from two products from the same company. So we've seen that a little bit.
Here, I'm going to call one out that's nice and commodity. Why Microsoft doesn't Visio Professional tie into the Office 365 suite like everything else you sell? It's crap. Keep going.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah, I think I've been dealing with a vendor situation. I think I would put it into the category of product being oversold. It was probably sold that it could do, all of these various things. And I think, over the time that I've now worked with this product and worked with the vendor to get back on a positive track, I think that I would say they sold it in the best possible light. It's not vaporware, but it was certainly sold in the best possible light, in the best possible circumstances. And so a couple of things for me looking at that situation. My first question is, whose fault is it that I'm in that situation? Did I have a really slick salesman or something like that? And I always come back to the accountability is mine. So looking back, I actually think if I would have done more due diligence, if I would have asked for more real world implementation examples, if I would have talked to more customers that were using it, I would have gotten more information. I don't think it would have changed the decision I would have made on the product selection, but I think I would have gone in much more eyes open in terms of what's going to work well out of the box and what's going to need a lot of care and feeding. So, first and foremost, we talked a little bit about some challenges with sales folks. And I think it's really important in an accountable role in cybersecurity. We've got to take that accountability. We've got to start off to say, ultimately, I'm responsible for the service I'm delivering, for the products that I purchase. And so it's really important from a supply chain perspective to have that really great degree of due diligence. So that's my one lessons learned is on that one. I wish I would have done more due diligence, and I certainly will next time. Coming back to that enterprise ready notion for a moment too, just one other thing I wanted to tie in there. One thing, especially working in the government arena, SAIC, we're something like 99% government business, federal government, state and local government. We're a government contractor. And so with that comes some common expectations around regulatory compliance requirements. And so things like FedRAMP become a big deal. Here in Texas, we now have TexRAMP. That's a really big deal. If you're going to have a SaaS product, you need to be TexRAMP authorized in Texas. And so back to that enterprise readiness, I think part of it is having that two-way dialogue with your vendors to make sure they understand those things, how important those things may be to you, if they are. and where they are, why they're important, what those vendors need to do to really be enterprise ready in that kind of environment. But back to resolving, my situation, I've actually been working with this vendor for a while. What it has really come back to is we had some problems with this product. We selected it, we got it installed, and it wasn't working with the ease and the automation that we were expecting. And so we struggled a bit. We struggled with support. We struggled with some escalations. And what it's really come down to resolve that situation is back to relationships. It was establishing a relationship with the right level of executive at that company, and then having really open and honest dialogue about the needs of both organizations, and doing that in a non-confrontational way. So no one likes to get yelled at. No one likes to have an adversarial relationship. And if you go in hard like that, even if you're justified, you have to ask yourself, what's the likely outcome that you're going to get from that? You may beat someone up. You may feel vindicated that you laid into them for pulling one over on you. But at the end of the day, we need things to work. And we need to draw a line in the sand to say, this is what I need to have it work. This is the time frame I need that to happen. And if I can't get that, then these are going to be the consequences. I'm going to replace that product. I'm going to go do something else. And it may be, that willingness to have some egg on your face internal to your organization to make a change. And so I think once we got to that right level where we could have that business conversation and we could, openly discuss, hey, these are my needs. Let me understand your needs. Let's understand how we got here and why this isn't working. We're able to get the traction that we needed to get the development support, to get the fixes and the updates that have actually brought things up to a level that is much closer to our expectations. I think we're not out of the woods yet, but we've certainly stabilized, and I'm very encouraged by that. So back to relationships, you got to know people, you got to know what's important to them. They have to take the time to know what's important to you. And sometimes that can be a frustrating road to find the right people to talk to, but it's worth the perseverance.
Absolutely. And I've taken both tacks in my career. Sometimes I have held them, held their feet to the irons and made them glow red hot. And other times it's been able to just be a partnership. But there's always, regardless of which direction you go, there's always a frank conversation where the understanding is reached, whether through force or through common grasp.
Collaboration doesn't mean that you're a pushover. And I think that's an important point. So I think, it's important to extend the effort to understand them and what they need, and to help them understand your situation, and to be really clear. So to have those lines in the sand to say, hey, this is what I need. This is the timeline that I need it. And these are the consequences if we're not able to get there, and recognize that that's a collective thing. And once you kind of get people, looking at the same page together, then I think you start down the path of having a plan that works. And that's been our experience here.
Yeah. Vaporware, since you hit enterprise readiness and overpromising somewhat, I'm going to talk vaporware and then enterprise readiness. And vaporware is just don't buy to the roadmap unless you like a high risk, high reward situation. Don't write a full PO for full price for the full software suite when only a quarter of the software suite is written. That I've seen it happen many times. And it just, if you're paying for R&D and you're paying for development, know that you're doing that and do it with eyes wide open. Make sure that your eyes are wide open on this. As for enterprise readiness, there are certain things that I kept expecting you to say that you didn't say and I don't disagree with anything. I just feel like you left off that one thing, which is that it's the taking the time to understand, seeking to understand again.
Yeah.
And understanding what your needs are, because it is, yeah, sure, you should have asked more questions in whatever software that was. And there were ways that you could have minimized your angst, if not pain, against buying software that was oversold. But in that same vein, to keep that trust, the salespeople also salespeople out there, it's incumbent upon you. And keep in mind that Michael and I both have a sales hat too in our jobs. We get it. You have to take the time to understand our needs when you're going to sell us something. Ask questions that go beyond requirements gathering. And this goes for all enterprise systems, all systems you're going to use. Requirements gathering is so critical, and you have to also ask the questions that seem obvious. So I'll be specific without being direct, or direct without being specific. In the modern enterprise, we have run out of IP addresses. The solution was to come up with a new IP address schema. It's called IPv6. If your enterprise software does not support IPv6 in its ability to work in an environment, it is not modern enterprise ready. And I don't care if you are one of the leading cloud providers in the world. If you roll out a new service and it doesn't support IPv6, it is not enterprise ready. If you are a niche software player who wants to support a customer with a big and diverse network, especially government, and it is not IPv6 ready, you are not enterprise ready. Don't sell it as such.
Yeah, and if I could add my top one or two to that list, I think that's a great example. I think also, with all of the new focus on supply chain and supply chain security, be ready, be prepared to answer questions about your security program. Be able to substantiate it. Are you TexRAMP compliant, StateRAMP, FedRAMP? Do you have SOC 2 Type 2 audits? All of those things have to come into being a true enterprise solution. If you're going to be an enterprise solution, you've got to have the same security that we're expecting, that our customers expect from us. So yeah, absolutely.
And if you're a software vendor and you happen to rely on some open source code, you need to disclose that and discuss how you controlled your source and how you validated there were no security issues in your open source modules. And then you also, if you wrote all the source, you still have to be able to validate how you made sure it was secure. Those are questions that have to be answered. We're not trying to not buy your software. We're trying to make sure that we've done all the work that is expected of us in the software as supply chain world, where a software supply chain based attack impacted so many folks just this past year.
Yeah, and going back, I was just rereading the Target incident this morning. I was reading a case study, and
it's a classic. I love it.
Going back to an HVAC vendor. Yep. So understanding each other's requirements and how things work, I think that understanding is a real fundamental key to good relationships.
Communication is always key. And on that note, I think we are at our time, past our time that we expected to talk. So thank you so much for joining us.
Andy, thanks for having me today. I really appreciate the opportunity.
So I'll go ahead and read my outro here. Do you have any closing comments or plugs you want to throw in there?
My only closing comments is, again, I appreciate the time. It was great talking to you today. And, for everyone out there, relationships and trust, couldn't emphasize it more. Cybersecurity is absolutely a team sport, and recognizing that really just about everyone is part of your team, whether that is your local IT team, your cybersecurity team, your business team, your vendor community, your customers. It is definitely a team sport. So look forward to seeing everyone out there too at the next couple of events. I know we've got a busy summer.
It's a team sport and it's virtually full contact. And it's a lot of fun. So if you're interested in the field, come join us. And if you're already here, welcome to the team. Glad to have you. I thoroughly enjoyed this discussion, and I appreciate you, Michael, for coming out and having it with me, especially on vacation. Make sure that cybersecurity parrot stays up to date on his next trainings. As always, I'm Apollo CISO Andy Bennett, and this has been an episode of Cybersecurity Distilled. We hope you enjoyed it. This is a production of Apollo Information Systems, because they loan me our marketing department to make sure this happens. And you can find us at apollo-is.com or on social media. We are on LinkedIn, and we also have a Facebook, just in case that's your thing. And we've got a great YouTube channel where these episodes, along with a whole bunch of other stuff, get put. And if you are just searching for Apollo Information Systems, that YouTube channel will come up. You can also go to YouTube and search for that. Until next time, Raise a glass to preparedness, vigilance, and resilience. Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.